All right, being 6 o'clock, we'll call a meeting to order and we'll start with the pledge. Call the roll, please, Bobby.
Alex Fedbeck,
Here.
Kelly Coyle,
Here.
Aaron Mishka,
Here.
Chris Bowl,
Here.
Chris Iden,
Here.
Cindy Lee Buchowski Hoffman,
Here.
Ken Charneski.
Here. All right. Item number 2, public forum portion of the event. So we'll turn it over to the fire chief to do a presentation, and then after the presentation, we will have question and answer session.
Okay.
Kelly, you want to come
You dim
over
the lights there on the wall.
left side, I think.
Testing. Yep. Okay, welcome to the public forum for the Kronenwetter ambulance proposal. Okay, some of you may have seen already previous board meeting. I wanted to bring it back for those who were not able to attend that last meeting. So Village of Kronenwetter is 52 square miles, largest village in the state of Wisconsin by land. As of January 1st of 2023, our population was 8,539. It is a mix of commercial, residential, and agricultural, and the continued growth in the residential. History of EMS service in Kronenwetter. Emergency medical responders responding to all locations within Kronenwetter respond directly to home or scene upon dispatch with EMS equipment to initiate care, including advanced airways, oxygen, naloxone, AED. In late 2022 and 2023, we initiated on-call weekends, guaranteeing at minimum 1 EMR on medical calls with medical equipment, including an AED and a Lucas device, which is an automated CPR device that was initially funded by grant funds. Our ambulance contracts in the past have been a Schofield-Mosinee split, Mosinee-Schofield, Rib Mountain, which then combined to be Safer, and then Riverside Fire District. The current contract with Riverside Fire District, a 3-year contract, was signed in June of 2022. That contract goes from 1/1 of 23 through 12/31 of 2025. That initial cost was $592 per capita of Kronenwetter based on the latest census. The 2024 cost is $6.04. The 2025 cost is $6.16. In addition, there is a $50 per patient care report that is per dispatch regardless of patient contact or transport. And Riverside receives all revenue from patient-level billing. The Village of Kronenwetter has no control over staffing or patient-level billing fees. What is flex staffing? A service can flex up to a higher level than the service's base level if they have personnel that could be licensed higher and is available on the call. For example, service is licensed with the state of Wisconsin to practice at the AEMT level, but have paramedics or RNs on their service. That service chooses to flex to paramedic. When there is one of those staff members available on the medical call, they can then practice to that higher level. However, that service can only bill their patients for the level of service they are licensed for. In this example, AEMT. EMS service throughout Marathon County. As you can see, I've listed all of the various ambulance services throughout Marathon County. Mosinee is EMT basic, flex to AEMT. Stratford, EMT basic, flex to AEMT. Edgar, EMT basic. Athens, EMT basic. Hatley, EMT basic. Riverside, which is the Schofield-Rothschild joint, is paramedic. They were AEMT upon when they first became a district. They went flex to medic in 2020 and then paramedic in 2023. Safer is paramedic, which is Rib Mountain, Weston. City of Wausau, paramedic. Burnhamwood, EMT basic. Central Fire, EMT basic. Spencer Fire, AEMT, and Wittenberg, AEMT. For those services with levels below paramedic, it's an average of 7% of calls requiring more advanced level of care. With AEMT level services, that average is lower since AEMTs are also ALS and can handle some of those ALS level calls. These are the different levels of EMS service in the state of Wisconsin: EMR, EMT, AEMT. The EMTI is still recognized, however, it is not a licensed level anymore. You cannot train to that level. Paramedic and then critical care paramedic. So the proposal for the ambulance service is the creation of an ambulance service within the Kronenwetter Fire Department as an entity of the village of Kronenwetter. It's to provide ambulance services at an advanced EMT level to all residents and non-residents with a need for medical assistance within the village of Kronenwetter. For calls requiring more advanced level of care, utilization of paramedic level intercept services. For example, major traumas, active seizures, some cardiac emergencies, thus keeping the majority of the ambulance calls at a reduced expense to the patients. We would continue to utilize first responders. In addition to the ambulance response, at minimum, one EMS personnel would respond directly to scene upon dispatch. That person can then be used to help lifting assist, or if they need a third person on the ambulance, they would become that third person. 24/7, 365 coverage, utilizing combination of daytime staffing and on-call, using historical data to determine that complete staffing model. Daytime staff could be utilized for initial and immediate fire response, when historically personnel coverage is lower for fire calls during those times. So if we had 2 or 3 personnel here during the day staffing the ambulance and we had a structure fire call, they can get that first engine out the door. With location of fire station, on-call staff would be utilizing the areas within the fire station for sleeping quarters. Station is currently equipped with locker rooms, showers, kitchen area with basic essentials, and lounge area. And the target start date of this ambulance this ambulance service would be January 1st of 2026. The benefits of municipal ambulance service: community coverage. A municipal ambulance service ensures comprehensive coverage for emergency medical needs within our community. Local control. The municipalities have direct control over the service, allowing them to tailor it to local needs. Decisions on staffing, equipment, and protocols are made by local authorities, including patient-level billing fees. When I say local authorities, I mean the 7 of you. Okay? The board has final decision in any and all expenses and any and all service fees. Integrated services. A municipal service can collaborate closely with other public safety agencies, such as fire departments and police, to create a seamlessly emergency response system. So when we get paged out on an ambulance call, maybe it's a car accident, we already train with the fire department, we already train with the police department, and that's seamless. Community investment. A municipal service invests in local jobs, training, and infrastructure. It contributes to the overall well-being of the community. Emergency preparedness. Having a dedicated municipal ambulance service enhances disaster preparedness and response, ensures adequate resources during emergencies. This could and would be part of the Kronenwetter emergency plan. It's also revenue generating, billing for services along generation of revenue to support the ambulance service with any additional revenue going towards the general fund. Some additional benefits: support of our police department. Knowing our officers well is a huge benefit. It builds a trust and confidence in our relationship to support them. Continued cross-training between EMS and fire staff. So on accidents and fire scenes, the EMS staff knows and trusts the skills of the fire personnel and vice versa. Knowing who is there to work, help, and their skill levels, especially on accident scenes where we all have to work together. Community outreach programs can grow. Currently, we offer some trainings to local businesses, such as the fire extinguisher training. An EMS group can also be utilized to train businesses and residents in CPR, first aid, etc., giving opportunities for additional donated funds, which then can be used to supplement our equipment and trainings. And a possibility of a back home transport. This is not in the proposal, but it is something that came up after we started looking at this. We have 3 residential homes in the village. These residents pay a high rate for transport from hospital back to the residential facility by another ambulance service today. In addition, those residents are charged over $1,000. We could possibly offer that service. For funding opportunities, there are a number of grant opportunities that are out there that will help assist services in many of these areas. The state of Wisconsin offers the FAP grant, and got a note on the bottom there that the FAP grant from the state of Wisconsin has an annual distribution of funds for ambulance service vehicles or vehicle equipment. There's an automatic amount that is paid, but you can also apply for additional funding to be used towards equipment. So these are prior call volumes. For 2022, we had 427 calls, and it lists out the number that were transported, number of canceled calls, et cetera. 2023, we had 408 calls for emergency medical services, and the split out of those as well. So the revenue in our proposal was based on the revenue that Riverside had received for 2022. In 2022, their revenues were based on an AEMT flex to medic level. Their revenues for 427 dispatches was 300 and, I apologize, transported. So not all 427 were transported. That revenue netted $214,608. That is where the revenue in my proposal has come from, on average. The 2022 patient level billing fees, when we first signed our contract with Riverside in 2022, our 3-year contract, this was the patient level billing fees. In 2023, for the start of 2024, they raised those patient level billing fees quite considerably in some cases. On the next screen, this is what we are suggesting Kronenwetter ambulance patient level billing fees would be. Again, this is suggested rates. This would have to come back to the village board of trustees to actually set these fees. And the next page has the comparisons between Mosinee, Wausau, Safer, Stratford, Riverside, current fees, and then what is being proposed for Kronenwetter. You can see that we tried to keep Kronenwetters in line with Mosinee, Safer, Stratford, some of the outlying areas which we are very similar to. Okay, I'm going to hand it over to my EMS coordinator, Alexa, to go over the scope of practice.
Marco, okay. Sorry, I don't normally hold a microphone, so just want to make sure I didn't blow your eardrums. We will pull up the scope of practice here really quick. If you want to exit out too, I have it pulled up in my PDF. Yep. Oh, now it wants to think. Oh, no signal. Hold on. My apologies, technology, you know. I don't know. It's connected. All the way in there.
Try it again.
There we go.
Sure. So the first page of the EMS scope of practice goes through what Teresa already went through, which is just the different levels of practitioners in the state of Wisconsin. We'll kind of go through some of these a little bit more in depth here. So when you see an O and an R, an O is optional for that level of service or that level provider to carry and or perform, depending what we're looking at for skills. Anything that is an R is required. There are a lot of similarities in between an AEMT and a paramedic. Biggest one here is going to be your airway, so we can place advanced airways, we just cannot intubate. But again, an intubation would be something that you would likely see on a severe trauma, of which then we would be having a paramedic perform some paramedic level care there. We'll go all the way down. So we can do a whole lot of things. We can do oxygen therapy, so starting somebody on oxygen. We can suction a patient. Ventilator is on there. Most patients we don't have a ventilator on, and again, if a patient were to be placed on a ventilator, that's going to be in a severe trauma case, of which paramedic level setting. Going down into our next is all the cardiovascular, so talking about the heart. AEMTs can perform a 4-lead and a 12-lead. The difference between us and a paramedic is that we cannot interpret that 12-lead at the AEMT level, so we would need to send that off to the local hospital for interpretation, and then they would get back to us via radio to let us know what we got going on. Of course, if we were at a flex level, then we could be doing that on our own, provided we had the staff to do so. Hemorrhage control, so that is controlling severe bleeding. Everything for an AEMT is the same as a paramedic in terms of bleeding control, CPR, cardioversion. If somebody needs to be cardioverted, that is typically a cardiac emergency, which again bumps us into that next higher level of care. But we can do a lot with cardiac in specific. Splinting, we can do that even as an EMR, and that's required through everything over an EMR up to a paramedic level. Different medication administrations, an ET tube, unless a patient has an established, or unless they had an AE, or, oh my sweet Jesus, an ET tube, which is that intubation that we would not be performing, so that would be why that one is a paramedic level skill. However, we can administer medications in numerous different ways. We can do it intranasally, which goes through the nostrils, IO, which is drilled into your intraosseous space, so it goes into your bone, IVs, intramuscular, so we can do it in the muscle. And then IV fluids, AEMTs can start IV lines and can also administer IV fluids as well, like your lactated ringers, normal saline. Getting down into the miscellaneous skills, you'll see a lot of these have R and a lot of them have O. Immunizations, you're not going to get an immunization typically in a ambulance type setting. But a lot of these are already skills that we do now. Patient physical restraints obviously is required of an EMT and above, and that's a whole nother different ballgame. Vital signs, everything like that is stuff that we currently perform now as EMRs. And then getting into the nitty gritty of the medications. So some of the medications like adenosine, if you are not familiar, is an antiarrhythmic medication. Again, that's going to fall into that category of a cardiac emergency, of which we would be requesting a paramedic for that. We can give anti-nausea medications. There's a couple different options down there. Aspirin. Atropine, another one that falls under that cardiac category. Oh, Bessie. A lot of ones on this page that are optional for a paramedic. Typically in your benzodiazepine category, that can be used for multiple different things. It can be used to stop seizures. Again, that was something that we identified. If somebody was having an active seizure and still seizing, we would be identifying that higher level of care that would be needed. Keep going. So a big one here is going to be epinephrine. In this example up here, an AEMT is required to give epinephrine, so that would be in the case of anaphylaxis. So if you were severely allergic to salmon and somehow came in contact with it and your throat starts swelling, you're not going to be able to maintain your airway, that's where we're going to give that epi. And that is something that also a paramedic can give, but we can give that at the AEMT level itself. Glucose for diabetic emergencies, ipratropium or Atrovent. It's optional at all levels. That goes down to breathing for anything, asthma, thank you. Couldn't remember my words. It gets into lactated ringers, that's fluids. Naloxone, we give that now as first responders for drug overdoses. Nitroglycerin, which again would be used in the event that somebody thinks that they are having a heart attack, we can administer nitro to a patient, same as the paramedic level. Your NSAIDs, so your ibuprofen, your naproxen, Toradol, we can give those, and those can be used as pain medications as well. Getting into the opioid category, opioids are going to be a paramedic level, and that's for a lot of good reason. They're a controlled substance, and there's a lot of different things that have to go around having a controlled substance like that on board. In our specific instance, sometimes if a patient is experiencing some pain, depending on their history, And also depending on what is causing the pain, it might not be ideal to give an opioid. That would be where our other options would come in for pain medications that an AEMT service could administer. And then getting down into this category, a lot of these medications on here are for sedation. So if they need to place that advanced airway, they need to sedate the patient so that the patient doesn't experience discomfort. Again, that's going to be at that higher level of care that we would identify very early on.
Keeping in mind what she's saying, these higher levels of care, that is that 7% or less of patients that currently throughout Marathon County on average.
This is specifically for interfacility transport, which we are not proposing our service to be utilized for interfacility transports. So this would not be applicable to us. And that is it for the scope. So I will get out of here and get back to the original presentation.
Okay, next we've got the fiscal information and impact. These are the numbers that are currently in the proposal. Our current EMS budget, that includes our contract fees for Riverside, our per-call fees, as well as any other fees, or any other expenses that our first responders currently have today. This is what our budget looks like for 2024, and then estimated budget go forward through 2028. This is the projected budget and expenses. If this was approved, this is the capital purchases that would be required. I have on here an ambulance new and an ambulance used. It is possible for us to look at 2 used rather than a new. We would just want one of those used ambulances to be newer than. There is no standard out there that says an ambulance has to be less than 10 years old. They have to be able to pass the standards based from the state, but there are plenty of services out there that their ambulances are 15, 20 years old, and in some cases older. The estimated 2025 budget, if approved, this includes some expenses for us to prepare for the January 1st, 2026 startup of the ambulance. And then projected revenues and grants. A projected billing revenue of $200,000, and this was created by taking 400 calls at $500 per call. Some calls you receive less revenue from, some calls you will receive more revenue from, but on average, it comes out to about $500 per call. Included $10,000 in grants, and that is from the FAP grant. We have been notified that that amount has increased, and we'll be looking at more along the lines of $30,000 to $40,000. And then 2% fire dues, we included $10,000 that can be used from the 2% fire dues in this category, because as people are on staff during the day, they can be utilized to go out and do fire inspections at our local business. This is something we already pay somebody to do, so they could do that as part of their job here when there is not an ambulance call pending. They would be in the ambulance out in the village. It's not like they're going out in their personal car in another vehicle and have to come back here. They would take the ambulance out to do those. And that is something that is normal among many municipalities. So then the estimated budget for 2026 and through 2028, if we had our own ambulance service, included wages, training, equipment, vehicle equipment maintenance, fuel, patient billing, medical control, etc. So at the top is current budget with no changes to service, and this is estimating that our contract fees would not change. So current budget for 2026 would be $139,000. With no revenue, our entire village expense then is $139,000. The projected budget of $258,000 with capital expenses, adding on interest on that capital expense loan, our total expenses would be $348,000. Revenues, funds, and grants would be $220,000, with then the village expense minus the revenues, funds, and grants being $128,000. Per capita calculations, And for my calculations, I used 8,500 as an estimated population. If we take our current EMS budget of 136,993, divide that by the population, our current per capita expense is $16.12. Using the 2026 projected amount with ambulance service, including interest, using that same calculation, total expenses divided by the population, the per capita came out to $15.15. This was a mileage and response time study that we did at various addresses throughout Kronenwetter. And you can see that for the majority of them coming from this fire station, we are quite a few minutes on some of them faster than it would be coming from our current contracted provider. There are a couple of places that are a wash, or they could beat us by a few seconds. The implementation operational plan. This implementation plan would follow the State of Wisconsin EMS operational plan requirements and guidelines. And this plan reflects an anticipated start date of January 1st, 26, and includes tasks necessary for full implementation of services. All of these pieces that I'm showing now are in the proposal. I just wanted to be able to show them for the public to be able to see. So part of the administrative, we would work with Marathon County Dispatch to align our response protocols, secure mutual aid and coverage agreements with adjacent ambulance services, educate staff accordingly with documentation procedures and updates to patient care reporting system to reflect transport capabilities and billing information, and reinforce relationships with hospital system and local nursing facilities, establishing parameters of providing an ambulance service. For billing, we would solicit billing projections and approve one vendor. Initial conversation with vendors have already taken place. Possible vendor options are EMS, MC, and Acumed. Establish a billing rate schedule which would be approved by the Village of Kronenwetter Board in the form of a resolution. And work with chosen billing agency to establish implementation process to link systems for information transfer. Equipment, we would have to purchase those 2 ambulances along with associated equipment to outfit the apparatus required by the State of Wisconsin for transporting patients. Outfit those apparatus with radios and equipment upon delivery, and establish a maintenance schedule based on manufacturer specifications with internal staff and externally as needed through a KFD preferred service center. Purchase additional capital assets and equipment, and capital assets generally have a long use life before needing replacement or repairs. For personnel, we would hire or up-train staff members to allow for completion of training prior to the implementation date. Begin additional recruitment processes immediately. Train existing and new members on the operations and procedures relating to the new equipment and protocols with the addition of the ambulance service. Currently, Kronenwetter Fire Department has 30 members. 7 members are firefighters, first responders. 3 members are solely first responders. And additional firefighters are interested in training up to provide that EMS coverage. We've also had quite an influx of new applicants. We had 13 applicants in the last 45 days that are going through the hiring process. Yep. So prior to tonight, we had put out a link that the residents could submit their questions. We have a list of those questions, and I'm going to let Alexa go through them.
All right. One of the biggest questions, I think probably, was the response time difference to a call if a paramedic is needed for an intercept. If dispatch contained information that alerted us, I say us as first responders or us as the ambulance service, that it would be something that we know and would identify that would need a paramedic, we would be immediately requesting them for a paramedic intercept. Or if needed, once we got to scene, if it was needed, we would dispatch them right away while not delaying care, doing what we can for that patient in that in-between time. How much is this going to cost taxpayers? So the service itself is not going to cost taxpayers anything additional. Any cost that would be incurred would be related to the amount of the loan that would be needed to obtain the apparatus. So roughly $13 on a $100,000 home, so $26 on a $200,000 home. How are you going to manage staff to ensure that we are staying under 1,200 hours in a 12-month period to avoid bumping them into the WRS system? We would use a rotating shift. An example that many stations use is like an ABC shift to rotate staff throughout the various coverages that we would need, along with tracking hours of staff and adjusting as needed to make sure that we're staying within those parameters. So the bus factor. So a question that was raised, for those that are not familiar with the bus factor, is if our fire chief were to unfortunately get hit by a Mack truck and wouldn't be here tomorrow, who's going to pick up after her? So me, as the EMS coordinator, I would take responsibility for ensuring that the ambulance proposal and preparations and operations continue. Fire leadership on the fire side meets with the fire chief once a month and an hour before every drill, which is twice a month. And additionally, as she determines necessary, they are kept up to date with any informations, any projects that she's working on, so they are very much in the know. This is our current leadership that we have. So we have Teresa O'Brien as our fire chief. She has had 19 years here on Kronenwetter. She has a firefighter, first responder. She was a lieutenant, EMS deputy chief, and now the fire chief. And prior to was an AEMT on Rothschild's ambulance service before the merger. Matt Burnt, he is one of our captains. He has 14 plus years here on Kronenwetter. His daytime job, he is a supervisor of a hydro dam. Tim O'Brien, 32 years in the fire service, 20 here at Kronenwetter on the fire and EMS side, and he was a truck driver. Kyle James, 15 plus years, he's a captain, both fire and EMS experience, and he's a supervisor at his daytime job. Chris Charneski, 24 years on Kronenwetter, he is one of our captains. Kurt Swenson, 20 years here on Kronenwetter, he's a lieutenant, and he is a resource specialist for the Aging and Disability Resource Center. Sam Elcox, 5 years here. He is a lieutenant, and he is a production engineer in his daytime job. Keegan Charneski, 5 years here. He's a lieutenant, and he is a laborer. And then myself, 2 years here. I'm a nurse, and I am a nurse manager. So the purpose of showing daytime jobs is to show you that there are multiple of us that have leadership outside of just the fire service. So we lead teams, and we know a little bit about what that looks like and what needs to happen to make things function. If we stay with Riverside, will our contract fees stay the same? So this is currently unknown in the future. So our current contract goes through December 31st of 2025. At any point prior to 90 days before the end, they could raise our rates. But currently through our contract, we have that annual 2% raise through the end of 25. If we stay with Riverside, could we negotiate the patient rates as well as the contract rates? So the patient rates are approved by their fire district board. So patient rates are likely not negotiable. That's something that we agreed upon that was determined by their board as part of our contract with them. And the remainder of our contract, the contract rates would stay the same as well because that was part of the agreement. When do majority of calls come in, and does this coincide with the times that the ambulance will be staffed? Historically, from 2021 to 2023, majority of our calls have fallen between that 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Friday. Staffing hours that would be set would ensure the best coverage model for when the most calls are received. Is the plan to purchase only one ambulance, and what is the backup plan if another call comes in while the ambulance is already occupied? So in our current proposal plan, we are asking for 2 ambulances. This would provide ideal service coverage. Current proposed implementation does include 1 brand new and 1 used. We could also, as Teresa already mentioned, look at the 2 used as long as they pass spec. Roll-up crews can be utilized for additional calls that come in after the first call is out. So if that first ambulance is already occupied, we can have a roll-up crew come in. They would roll our second ambulance out the door to get to that call. If additional ambulances were to be needed, we would have mutual aid agreements that we could rely on our surrounding ambulance services to help us provide. Oops, sorry. How is it beneficial to the residents to lose a paramedic service to downgrade to an EMT level? The benefit comes from the reduction in patient billing fees. Again, if a medical emergency requires paramedic level care, one would be requested at the scene, which would be no additional cost to that resident. With the flex service, the AEMT to flex paramedic, obviously this would be then in-house if we had the staff to provide that. Does the call volume meet the needs for an ambulance service? So Teresa went through this in the initial part at the start of this presentation. It's just laid out here for you. As of 2024, and this was as of last night at midnight, we are tracking 185 med calls already for the year. And they've gone up quite significantly from 2019. Who is paying for the service? So we do have a current EMS budget. There's grant funding options that Teresa went through, taking out a loan and then generating revenue would help to offset some of those costs. Can anything be done regarding quicker response times? So per Marathon County Dispatch, once we are initially paged out for a medical emergency, we have 4 minutes to acknowledge that and 8 minutes to get en route to the call. Currently, our EMRs are going en route generally within 1 to 2 minutes of our first initial page out. In addition to having personnel here at the station, that would result in a quicker response time with the majority of locations in Kronenwetter. How can you justify paying for 24-hour coverage when we do not even get 2 calls a day? Wisconsin DHS Code 110 requires any ambulance service to be a 24/7, 365-day coverage. Call volumes, unfortunately, are not a predictable factor, but the on-call system that we would have in place would be paid at a lower rate than that of the daytime coverage staff, so that helps reduce the cost of quote-unquote full-time. What level of EMT will you be hiring, and will there be paramedics? So the current proposal is an AEMT, advanced EMT. We could potentially look at doing that advanced EMT flex to paramedic level. How is adding a service beneficial to our community financially speaking? How would the service benefit our community? So while current revenues and billing are going towards our current service provider, if this service was here in the village, we would be bringing in revenue. Increasing revenue could contribute towards other projects that the village may identify, such as road fixes, playground updates, anything that we see fit, in addition to lower billing rates. When ALS is called, so calling for a paramedic, who will be responsible for that additional cost? This cost would go to the ambulance provider, so it would go to Kronenwetter Fire Department. It would be no additional cost to the patient, and there would be no differential on their billing fees. What are the benefits of having an ambulance service under the umbrella of the fire department? Consistency, cohesion, and commitment to the community. So I think it's pretty safe to say a lot of us, even those that don't necessarily live in Kronenwetter but are on the Kronenwetter Fire Department, we've got a dedication to serve this community. Some of our members live a decent distance out and they drive here for every single fire call because they have a commitment to this village and the members that we have in it. And the service itself would be governed by the village board, as Teresa already addressed. So they would, you guys would approve everything. And really you have the ability to set limits on wherever you see fit and working together to make sure we're doing the right thing for the people in this village. It was stated in 2023 that an on-call weekend of 1 EMR was on all medical calls. AED and Lucas device were initially funded by grant funds. How is it funded now? So the AED and Lucas device were capital expenses. They're not reoccurring costs. The EMR on-call weekend is part of the current EMS budget that was approved by the village board. Ooh, I think I missed one. Okay, no, we're good. Why are we trying to start a department now, specifically at an AEMT level, when there are departments all over the country, state, and county struggling with staffing issues? There, in this question, there was a reference to Wisconsin Rapids had released a news article that they were struggling with staff being a full-time department, offering WRS, sick time, pay and benefits. So call volume support is the biggest one. There are many members in this department already identified, as well as significant others of those that serve on our department that would want to serve on the EMS side. We have current EMS staffing from an EMR all the way up to the paramedic level, and then those new applicants that we've been getting in. What is the insurance cost for vehicles? So this is the cost breakdown for every vehicle in the village of Kronenwetter.
The additional cost, my understanding was that $168.71 per vehicle.
What does space look like to house 2 ambulances? Would we need a new building? Our current building, our current fire department, was designed to include 2 bays for ambulances. There is not currently any discussions or planning in progress regarding an expansion to the fire department or any building structures. This was in 2006 that when we were looking at the addition and expanding the existing municipal building here to add the police department and expand our current fire department with bays to add a future ambulance service. And that's just a larger view. This was mapped out, so we had measured our fire department, which is also part of something that if we were granted the ambulance service, we would have to measure out per Medicare standards. So just knocking 2 birds with 1 stone here. So this breaks down where all of our equipment would go. I know that previously we have housed DPW stuff. And so there is still room identified here that we can still have those vehicles in our department for the wintertime coverage if needed, so they can do snow removal. And then the last question, what about a flex to medic? Is that an option? So yes, this is a viable option and one that we have been researching pretty extensively. With our current staff, we have paramedics and nursing. They can be utilized to reduce the number of intercepts that would be needed. This also opens up the possibility of hiring additional paramedics that may want to join our team super part-time, 1 day a week, 1 day a month, just to get some more hands-on experience. That is it for this. I don't know.
Yes,
To the
are you able to
public.
use the other mic that's there on the desk so we can pass around a remote one?
You betcha.
I mean,
Well, that,
They disconnected? Well, why is there a?
oh yeah, yours works.
You give the podium one.
I'll be the Vanna White.
well, what do you get to look at immediately?
We'll use this one.
All right, so just raise your hand and you'll be given a microphone to ask your question.
Do you have Sarah's name and address?
No.
Oh, okay. My question is actually more directed towards the board. So I feel like we've put the entire onus of this on our chief, and the board has not really done the right thing. Any other city that we've gone, or that you can research, if they're gonna do an ambulance service, it goes to a special committee. It gets vetted thoroughly by people that are capable of doing it. There's SWOT analysis is done. This has spent a total of, I believe it was 31 minutes at committee level. One of the committees gave it 3 minutes worth of questions. The other committee gave it about 10 minutes worth of questions, and then we've just moved it to this level. Obviously, by the group of people and the social media, everybody has a ton of questions and none of them were answered. And I'm gonna go further and say, there's a lot of questions that aren't answered on there that maybe Teresa does have the answer to, that's her job, but that hasn't been communicated. And the fact that we're sitting here about to make a vote on something that could potentially make or lose hundreds of thousands of dollars over its life, I think that's terrible. I think this should be voted to go to a subcommittee, an ad hoc committee, and actually be vetted out properly and be able to answer every question that's asked and not just oh yeah, it sounds good, or oh no, it doesn't sound good.
Next question?
Could I respond to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
I can confidently say I've not just spent 30 minutes on this. I spent at least 12 hours. Minimum, just in discussions with our fire chief, with Riverside, looking at my own financial analysis of this, educating myself about this, probably 12 to 20, probably closer to 20, just reading about the different services. I don't know what everyone else on the board has done independently, but, I just wanna put that out there myself. I do have a spreadsheet analysis that I've prepared. I don't know how to share that elsewhere, but some of you have copies. I have a more updated one, including a worst-case scenario type of one, to look at all the risks.
You have another question, Sean?
I want to ask a question regarding his question.
Sure.
I can just say it loud, if you want me to say it loud. How long does the insurance company have to pay an ambulance bill?
Good question. I don't know the answer to that.
The answer to it is 366 days.
Okay?
That's not something that the board knows right now. We should not be voting on if we need ambulance service, because with that number, that means we could technically go a year with zero revenue before they pay us, and we would have to carry it for a year as taxpayers.
Can I respond to that?
You may.
That is why we would be hiring a billing company. We would not be doing the billing ourselves.
Correct, but my point being, the
No
onus is
revenue.
completely on you right now. You're wholly responsible for this, so if this were to go forward and it fails, it would all get pointed to you, and you're our chief, your job is not to do accounting, your job is to run our fire department. The board's job is to vet everything out and say, are we willing to take this risk or not?
Which is why I shared the 2022 revenue that had been received at the fall of 2023 from Riverside. It showed the 214,000. We had received that amount of revenue. That may have continued to grow after that point, but at that point, when they were building their budget for 2024, that is the revenue that was dedicated to 2022. That had been received in less than a year.
And I'm not arguing with you, I'm just saying that's not your job. Your job is to run our department. It's the board's job to know those things and to say, are we willing to take that risk or not? And if it fails, it's gonna, oh, chief told us it was gonna work and it didn't. We shouldn't be putting that on the side, it should be on the board.
I will be perfectly honest, they did not put this on us. We have put this in front of them.
Correct, but I'm saying it needs to be properly vetted, so that way it doesn't fall back on something else. If you went to any other municipality, this would have been a huge discussion with a subcommittee or an ad hoc committee or whatever else. It wouldn't have just come to the board after a few minutes at each committee meeting being recommended forward.
Anybody else have a question?
Okay, Guy Friedel, 2240 Ruby Drive. I've spent quite a bit of time over the last couple of months studying the ambulance proposal. So I think that the situation we're in now puts the citizens and the Kronenwetter Fire Department in a difficult position. The fire department is making a specific proposal. And what Mr. DeMay suggested is to have a committee look at that as a separate body. You know, we appreciate the fact, and I've said this many times, that we appreciate all the work that the fire department has put into coming up with this proposal. But that doesn't mean that there shouldn't be questions asked about this. Is there a clear need for the village to form its own ambulance service? Are the village needs for an ambulance service currently being met by Riverside at a cost which is favorable to the village and minimizes the risk? Is the quality of care that Riverside provides better than the quality of care that the proposed Kronenwetter ambulance service would provide? Are cost figures that were provided as part of the Kronenwetter Fire Department ambulance service proposal well supported and thorough? To me, the quality of care is more important than the cost. The projected cost savings that's in the cover sheet that was submitted by the fire department is $9,000 a year. I have a number of doubts about the actual figures in the Kronenwetter ambulance service proposal. One of the specifics is that there's two components. One, as Chief O'Brien mentioned, it's $22,000 a year basically per call, and then there's a per capita cost, which is shown in the ambulance service proposal by the fire department at $65,000 a year. Those two numbers would total up to $87,000. The contract fees in 2022 were, say, $70,000. In 2023, they were $70,931, and there were $72,000 budgeted in 2024. That's a $14,000 or $15,000 increase, or less than what the total submitted by the fire department is. They're saying $87,000, $65,000 plus $22,000. And in my book, that's $87,000. So if you look at the cost, it would cost $12,400 less a year based upon these numbers with Riverside, which would knock the amount that we're saving into a negative category. In other words, it would cost us $3,000 or $4,000 a year more. This is a difficult question to ask because it's pitting the citizens against the numbers provided by the fire department. I don't think this can be sorted out tonight. So I hope that, I hope at some point that we're going to be able to have an ambulance service. And I hope that we would go for the best ambulance service that we could get with new ambulances, looking into this possibility of transport, which was mentioned, and which Riverside does. My understanding, they currently have 4 ambulances, and they do a lot of transport work. Perhaps we should be looking into the future on this for a long term. So, all in all, I think that this should be studied more. I think that Mr. DeMay's suggestion of having a committee, perhaps composed of citizens, a couple members of the fire department, possibly a couple board members with different perspectives on this issue, take the time they need to really assess this and remove the fire district, our fire department, from this difficult situation. We don't mean to criticize the fire department. They're a valuable resource to our community, and we shouldn't put this in a position where they've got to defend their own proposal. It should be looked at independently and thoroughly. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Name's Larry Schaefer, 2176 Crescente Drive. Lived in Kronenwetter for 47 years. I was one of the 3 founding members of the original first responder team. At that time, that was kind of a scary thing, but it was well taken, well needed, and I think well received by the community. Do we need to go forward now? I don't know. I'm not for or against this, but that bunch of numbers up there was way too much to absorb in one sitting. I mean, that has to get posted. I think that stuff should be posted so people can look at it. Originally, we started first responders because the ambulance service, we were way out here in the sticks. And ambulances were just kind of coming up to speed, and they had some real problems with staffing, such that one department had 6 or 7, and one of those quit, and it was down to 5, it was down to 4. And there was one department that had so few people that they were running all the time that they didn't respond to a call. It cost the life of a person who was doing something they shouldn't have been doing, but they didn't get there. So these first responder things started. They originally just the province of the state patrol, because they get to some of these scenes way out in the sticks before any ambulance people. So they were kind of the original first responders. So we did that for 22 years here, 25 actually. But I think we need to take a harder look at some of these numbers. I'd want to make sure we have a good head count. I saw what the death spiral looks like in an EMT situation. When the 3 of us started it, there were just the 3 of us, and it was really busy. And I wouldn't want to put people in that spot again. It was really tough to handle that. And we recruited more people. We got a lot of first responders now. I'm not clear you're going forward with a proposal for an EMT A level. Is my correct? Do you have, yeah, and I saw in your staffing, existing staffing, the 7 first responders. Are all those training up to A level? Or are you just gonna hire off the street A level? I missed all that in the blue.
already are at the A level or higher.
Okay,
We also have someone currently at the A level. But even at the A level, you still utilize your EMTs and your EMRs.
yeah. But
So only one person on the ambulance needs to have the
Yeah.
EMT level.
What kind of a head count do you think you're gonna run? 10 full-time, 10 people, or to run your ABC team? That's critical to making, not burning people out. Been there, seen that. And, so I think we need to look more at this, and I'd like to see a little more detail, but that's my opinion. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Teresa, how many of those new applicants are EMT or AEMT certified?
Already today?
Out of the 15 that just applied?
Yes, I cannot answer that. I don't believe most of them have it in us.
Okay,
That doesn't mean that they did not do it. Out of the 4 we just interviewed, all 4 of them interviewed both fire and EMS.
okay. Just because there's not a lot on the staff that is, so that's good to know. Like, that the interest there is there. I just didn't know if they were coming from other departments.
As I said, we also have had a number of other department members reach out to us. If the proposal was to pass, they would apply. Some of the benefits, Wausau, fire received a very large safer grant, which is for staffing. And by doing that, it allows their staff members to be on volunteer departments. Some of these people actually enjoy being on volunteer department on top of their full-time job because it gives them an opportunity to step back a little bit and do the actual fun stuff, they say. So sometimes in their daytime job, they are given that opportunity. So
Right.
this is a good opportunity to also be able to open up to other members of our community that are already trained and want to get back.
And how many full-time will we have during the day staffed?
They won't be considered full-time,
Okay,
but there will be 2 on staff in the day.
okay. And how many now that are on staff would be available to do that? Because I know a lot of people work jobs during the day.
So we do have some staff members currently that would be allowed to be able to do that at different opportunities through the week. So you may not be able to do it Monday through Friday, but they can
Right.
take it Monday, they can take it Wednesday, they can take it Friday.
All right, and what hours are we looking at being staffed?
We have not set those hours, and we'll be looking at the historical data and bringing that to
Okay.
our report department, set those hours.
Good.
But looking at, you want to set your hours so that your daytime staff, if they do have a daytime job, the overnight staff has time to get to their daytime job.
Right.
So some of the other local departments use like a 6 to 4 or an 8 to 4.
I know like Mosney was on a 8 to, and they switched to a 6 to 6 because they couldn't get that night coverage. So would they be required to be EMT and fire certified?
For the daytime, yes.
Okay. And how many now are in WRS on the department?
3.
And when did they qualify?
2018 and 2019, I think.
Okay. And then I have some other things. I went through all the meetings and all of the stats and stuff, and I reached out to just get questions answered, just because I want to make sure that we all have the correct information, and so that we can decide accordingly, whether we decide for or against it. One thing that I'm concerned about is you're talking about Riverside's 2022 revenue from us, but they didn't start with us till 2023,
No, they started with us in 2022.
January 1st of 23. And that's right on your slide. 23, 24, and 25 is their 3-year.
We had a 3-year contract for 23. We had a 1-year contract for 23.
Okay, so that was one thing I was concerned about. The other thing is, and I did see that you changed it, and that's good, is you were saying Mosney and Stratford were flexing to paramedic, and that is not true. And you did get that changed today. I just want people to also be aware that, who are we gonna call for paramedic intercept?
There are multiple options in Marathon County. There is medevac, there is
Yeah.
state
Right, so who would we call first?
Would depend on, we have options.
Right.
Based on the cost, if you go based on the cost, it would be safer.
Okay, so in my
Based on
question,
location, it would be Riverside.
okay, and my question to that is, we know that Medevac is probably gonna be out on a transfer. They're usually not available for an intercept. I don't want people to have the wrong impression that we're gonna call Riverside and they're gonna come. Because if they're out on a call and they only have one medic left in the building, they will take a pass. Then we will have to call Safer. And if they're already out and they have one medic left in the building, they're gonna take a pass. Then we're gonna be calling for WASA.
I will respond to that, as that is the same type of situation we are facing today. We are not guaranteed a paramedic on every call.
The first two meds out the door from Riverside are guaranteed a med. And that came directly from Riverside. That the first two meds, the one that we sent to they sent to basic, that was the third or fourth med out the door.
But that happens
It does, yep.
even today.
But we have a higher chance of it happening if we're not contracted with somebody. And I just want people to understand that,
We do sign ALS intercept contracts as well.
right? But they won't clear their house. And my other question is, so if we have that flex for a year, where we don't have to be up to AEMT staffing, are we gonna contract with somebody else for that year also and have a contract? Or are we just, how are we gonna work that with, because you said if we don't have full AEMT staffing, we have that year. How are we gonna work that year to make sure we get coverage?
No, we will still provide ambulance coverage. There will also be mutual aid agreements signed with other
Okay.
municipalities, same as it happens today with other municipalities. They all have
Okay.
mutual aid agreements with each other.
Right,
So that if you need to call on somebody, you have those options.
okay,
And that is not just here, that is throughout.
okay, good. And then, I was concerned about one other thing, when you guys talked about the return transport that you guys did from the hospital. We aren't licensed to do return transports. And that put a huge liability on us as a village by doing that. And also you stated that a member of Safer called you at home. It was a person that worked on Safer that was calling you as a member of the ED.
No.
Callie called you.
No, Kelly did not call me.
Okay,
It was a member of Safer Fire District
Okay.
calling me from work that evening. A different ED staff called me. I did not speak with Kelly at all.
okay. Because that's what we were told, is that it was actually Callie that called, and she was not a Safer employee. Okay, I just want to make sure that we have all the correct information and that we are just really, again, like I said at the last meeting, I want to make sure that if we do it right, and that we have everything out there for everybody so we can succeed at it. So thank you.
One of the reasons we are bringing this forward now and not bringing it into service until January 1st of 2026, so that we have the time to build up and be ready for that. Would we be ready to start an ambulance in a month from now? Absolutely not. And I wouldn't expect that we would be.
I have one more thing on that though. We have a 4 to 5 year waiting list on an ambulance right now for a new ambulance.
There are used options, and
Right.
we were quoted 60 months.
So I checked with Eric on Sunday. We ordered an ambulance in 2019. We were supposed to get it this summer and it just got pushed back another year because there's such a back order on chassis.
It will depend on the type of ambulance you're purchasing as well. Like I was saying, would we be ready for a month? No, absolutely not. We are bringing this forward so we have that year and a half to prepare ourselves. There are a number of steps that still need to go through. You would see us at the board level many times between now and that January 1st to approve various steps throughout this whole entire process. Every step would have to, I shouldn't say every step, but majority of steps, anything that would be fiscally related or equipment related, would come back before you to approve, including the patient level billing fees. We are proposing those, but you are the ones that would actually be setting them.
My name is Bernie Kramer, 2150 East State Highway 153, Peplin. Kronenwetter's had a lot of different experiences in the ambulance. I've been a resident for 55 years. And originally they started out with Mosinee because of the proximity and they had an ambulance. And then as time went on, we got down here to Schofield. And then we got back when Mosinee started their ambulance service over there was 5 communities involved. It was around 25 years ago, I'm just guessing. And they built a whole new structure out there. And these 5 communities, they band together. And there was one ambulance already in Mosinee, and of course they joined it. And as time went on, we thought it was too expensive for us comparatively. We had to help pay for the building, and then we had to also, with our population, we were getting a greater amount of cost to Kronenwetter. Well, that went on for, I don't know, 5, 6 years. We pulled out of there, and then we went down to Schofield. So, I mean, just think how far away from Kronenwetter Schofield is down by the Eau Claire River. So then we were down there for a number of years. Then we went over to Safer. And then from Safer, here we are now with Riverside. And this Riverside is really a good situation because geographically, we're at the doorstep. I mean, it couldn't be more ideal situation than we have right now. As a resident that long and seeing all the different configurations we had, and we were always looking for better and more reasonable. I mean, we were not high rollers or anything like that. As an example, I mean, communities, they get their service depending upon what values they have. As an example, you have over here Safer, Rim Mountain, they pay $500,000 a year to subsidize that ambulance. And over here at Weston, they pay $1 million. Imagine that. To subsidize, you can't make money on ambulance service. There's anybody that thinks they can do it, just talk to all the ambulance services all the way from Spencer all the way over here to Hatley. When I spoke to them about making money, all they did was laugh at me. They thought it was a big joke. Yeah, I said, just go out and buy 2 ambulances. I said, and that's when your cost is going to start. And you don't know where it's going to end, and staffing is a major problem all the time. So then, okay, now, here we are now. So paramedic is a big discussion. Well, let's talk about just response. I mean, they average on all the calls they get 8 minutes to get to the house or wherever it is. That's pretty good. Now, there's a lot of them on the north, then they get there 4, 5, 6, 7 minutes on the call. Now, what are you going to do when you get call in? 70% of the calls are going to be call in. So they're supposed to get there within 8 minutes. That's Marathon County's got that standard. So here you're going to be wherever they are, jumping in the car and trying to get down there in the 8-minute so-called limit. So okay, then they ought to first go to work and get the ambulance out of the garage. Well, down there at Riverview, they get out of there in 1 minute and I think it's 4 seconds or something like that. And they showed a monthly report. I get the monthly reports. It's right there, and the 8-minute average amount of time it takes to respond any place in Kronenwetter. Sure, some place on 153 is a little longer, but down here it's more short. But now there again, it depends upon what you value. If you want to go back and get the call-in service, so be it. I mean, you know, I'm an old man, and I'm one of the suspects for getting a call. We just had 2 people out there by Sicko's Barn that get called away about 2 weeks ago, and they were suspects. So they got called. They went past our house out there. But anyhow, you know, I have to compliment Riverside to where they're at. I mean, they consolidated Schofield to Riverside, and those 2 communities have to contribute $650,000 a year just to keep that thing going. I mean, here we're getting it for $50,000 a year, or a little bit more, just for the ambulance. I mean, we're like orphans. I mean, that's peanuts. I mean, and the quality of service we get, the response, and we're done. We don't have to worry about buying, paying a cost for the debt, and then we don't have to store the ambulance, and we don't have to worry about any kind of manning up. So anyhow, thanks for listening to my dog and pony show, but anyhow, good luck.
I would like to clarify, the funding that comes from municipalities to fund Riverside and Sabre, fund both the ambulance and the fire service. That is not just, that amount is not just covering the ambulance service.
Hi, I am one of the people that graciously volunteer for the fire department EMT. And I think everybody has a good point here, but let's look at this in black and white. We have a huge population, and it makes sense to go full-time at this point. Look at the population of Rothschild, Schofield. It's comparable. They have their own ambulance service. Why wouldn't we? Why are we paying somebody else to do the work we can? It's easy to get in that mindset of being afraid of change when you're comfortable with your current situation. But when you compare full-time ambulance services to volunteer, you're comparing apples to oranges here. You have nothing to say that Kronenwetter cannot do this. We can. And it would be your money just going to the same spot, but directly to there where it's controlled. So that's about all I have to say about that, but thank you for listening.
First off, I'd just like to say thank you guys so much. Every single one of you, thank you so much for coming out. You know, without everyone being here, we can't get the community's opinion. So I'd really like to thank every single person that showed up today. I'd just like to ask, as a village, why should we support a proposal when our staffed hours would drop and we would no longer be receiving paramedic services? This proposal comes at a large financial burden, and we already receive it as a fraction of the cost. It's been pointed out multiple times that we pay, you know, pennies on the dollar, like $65,000 a year. It's a very manageable cost, and just to see, like other people said, other community members said, just the cost balloon into something that we can never even control, never even begin to start to think about controlling. It's, you know, it's a concern. I do agree that, you know, it's very awesome that somebody has put all this time into thinking about every single aspect. It's, you know, your work has not gone unnoticed. And I'd like to thank every single one of the members of our fire department. But I just like to think about what comes to the future, think about what comes next, think about every single aspect again. And like other members of the community said, maybe put it on a community board, something like that. But thank you, every single one of you. Thank you.
I think something that impacts this issue is what the community's view for the long term is about how much industrial and or commercial growth does this community really want. You know, we talk about the Kowalski Road interchange, but, you know, do we want that traffic in our neighborhoods? Do we want the entire Business 51 corridor to be developed for commerce or for industry? You know, we've taken some actions that, you know, promote residential. If the village doesn't want to commit to that, then the need for ambulance service is less. If you look at Rothschild, if you look at Schofield, they have a much more well-developed area for business and industry, much more well-developed. They have a much higher traffic corridor, which generates more accidents. We have primarily residential. So if we stay a residential community, there is not a strong increasing need for ambulance service. It's probably pretty much like it is. And frankly, we have largely run out of area for residential growth. We don't have other areas to grow unless we expand to the east. That's future, but there are no current plans for that to happen. That's not being pushed. The village is not pushing this. So I think we've got some fundamental questions here that largely impact the need for our own ambulance service. I think we've got, in my opinion, I think we've got Riverside right where we want them. They want our revenue to minimize the amount that they have to contribute to their fire department, their ambulance service. So I think we're in a very good negotiating position. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's my perspective. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Mr. Chair, if you don't mind just 1 minute, I much appreciate all the comments from everybody, and the discourse was great, and the way that everybody articulated a position and asked questions and contributed really helps make a better Kronenwetter. Young man, you'll make a good city administrator someday, or village administrator. So he said it well, and finally, just to say, I know that staff, and Teresa specifically, you worked on this. It's been a building a product and trying to come up with a lot of different dynamics, and it's hard to contribute a lot of time. Teresa doesn't, not everyone knows what Teresa's schedule is like. We appreciate it. It's for deliberation, of course, and I thank you. And I'll just leave the mic up here. Okay.
I just wanted to ask one question for Chief. I guess not one question. I know there's been a few comments here about staffing hours going down. Your proposal would have staff at the fires, just to clarify, it was set in there that you'd have the full-time during the day hours, but you'd have staff there with the beds, like, much like another 24/7 ambulance service, correct?
It has been said before, you only have so many minutes to get an ambulance out the door for dispatch. The location of our fire station is not a place for us of that happening very well. So the on-call staff would be utilizing this fire station, sleeping quarters, there's lounge area, kitchen, lockers, showers. So they would be here, getting that ambulance out the door in that less than 1 minute. And we've had a number of cases in the last couple of weeks where we've been here when the page goes off, and our distance to these locations is much, much shorter than our current contracted providers. We show it in, we be able to get to those locations in Kronenwetter, specifically the south end of Kronenwetter, much faster.
And there's comments about the paramedic as well, level service. What would it take just to go to straight paramedic?
We would need to have enough paramedic staffing, so when you hear people, full-time departments complain about having enough staff, the majority of those departments are struggling to get paramedic level staffing because of the amount of schooling and effort that it takes to do that. A really good example is Safer themselves in 2023 went to their board to lower their staffing level to an 8 EMT level. It was approved. And a month later came back and had to undo what they just asked for because they realized it would lower their revenue by over $100,000. So 8 EMT level to staff is a little easier than a paramedic level staffing. But that shows that the majority of the calls do not require a paramedic level individual because one of our largest departments in the area was looking at lowering that staffing level to that so that they can get that staff. Hiring EMTs and AEMTs is much easier, but I would like to ask that instead of just accepting our recommended action, that you change it to an AEMT flex to medic, which gives us the opportunity to utilize those that are already at that level. So then the majority of the calls, we would not need to call for the ALS and staff, we would have those staff on hand.
Do you have any other questions?
Yes, yeah, just to follow up on that. So if we started right at flex paramedic, that makes sense at a minimum. Could you foresee a future where we could move to paramedic after, like, let's say a year or within a year if we had the staff? I mean, would there be an attempt to move straight to paramedic and get that level of training?
Absolutely, that's always a potential, and I mean, as you can see, we showed the growth in our EMS calls in the last we went from 250 26 calls 5 years ago to over 400 calls, and that is on track to be over 400 calls for the third year in a row. Add another 2 years in there, 3 years in there, our call volume is up to 600 and 700, which is a very large potential of that happening. We could move then at that point to a paramedic level and be able to afford to have those on staff.
Thank you.
How many of the people that you're interviewing right now, for the department is what you want for the ambulance service? What is your, you said, we're at 30 people, right, for, the fire department? Right. So what is your goal for just the department right now? How many people do you need or feel comfortable or want to run with? Just right now, without the ambulance service. Without the, I mean, we're approved by the board, and I'm gonna take this way back, because I know this was, might even be before Chris and Chris. We were approved for 40 members of the fire department, and that might be something that we need to look at. That was 40? 40. 40. Correct, and that, like I said, that might have been before Chris and Chris even were on the board, so we're going back 15 years-ish?
Probably during Rod's time.
Maybe, might have been.
Oh, looking back at that.
Yeah. Might have been. Ideally, we would be fully staffed at 40, maybe more, maybe plus, and have a list of members that are sitting there waiting on a waiting room. Okay, and then, training, that comes out of our pocket, right? That is part of the budget. Okay, and then, some of our EMT training, that comes out, okay? So. That is part of the proposed budget. No, I'm not even talking annual. I'm not, even going there, I'm talking about right now. Currently today, yeah. Okay. Then at that point, what happens, to keep people here? Why, you know what I'm saying?
I do. So we have trained a number of individuals over the years, to the EMT level, and then they leave us because we don't have an ambulance service, and they want to use the, utilize the skills. Is that what you're asking?
I'm just asking,
We have lost some to Riverside, we have lost some to Safer, we've lost some eventually to Wausau because we continue on with the paramedic. But we started their initial training here, to get maybe 1 or 2 years out of them, and they realized, well, we really like this EMS thing, but we want to utilize our EMT license, so they move on to another line.
so are they looking for full-time, or are they looking for part-time?
Most of them are just looking to have time on an ambulance.
Okay, so, but the job that they go into, is it a full-time, or is it a
No.
volunteer part-time?
Not necessarily always full-time, some are, some aren't. It depends. We also do have a couple members of our department that are on multiple departments specifically so they can use those skills. And I myself did that when I first got my EMT license. I have always stayed one of the top responders in this village, but I also gave my time to Rothschild so that I could get that analyst experience, which I learned I could have.
Do you try and keep your, staff by, talking to them about staying and coming back and going back and forth?
I don't exactly remember.
Well, you said that you worked on 2 different, you worked at Kronenwetter and worked at Rothschild?
Correct.
So you, as people are, hey, I'm out of here, I'm EMT, blah, 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 hey, why don't you stay here? Just kind of go back and forth, you can build up your skills, and then we still have,
And the hope is that we can do that if they move outside of Kronenwetter for EMS, to be able to utilize the EMS skills here. But I will be perfectly honest, in the last 2 years, we've kind of lost a lot of people, and some of that reflects truly on leadership. Leadership speaks.
so at that point, with an ambulance, say you get to your field of dreams
say, if you get your two ambulances, you got 40 people on the, fire department, how many do you need for the, ambulance then? Like I said, your field of dreams. What are we ultimately looking at? Some people are bringing up paramedic. So like I said, field of dreams, what is? My requirement of my firefighters would never change to make them all EMS. Because you need firefighters as well as EMS. Ideally, we would have a half and half or better on the EMS side. And I don't see an issue in getting to that. Because like I said, we have a good number of individuals on the fire department that have not went to EMS level because we don't have that many services. But would like to move to that level. We also have a number of applicants that have applied for both fire and EMS.
You're doing that right, because there's people that don't want to be EMS, who want to be fire, and you still need those. Mostly gets a lot of, mostly it's out because some don't want to be fire, some don't want to be EMS. But you're doing good things.
All right, last call for audience questions, then we're gonna cut it off.
I would say a couple items. I was on King Kronenwetter when we hired the police department, okay? And I voted against it, to tell you the truth, because at that time, we were getting county, so we got our police department. Our police department at that time, we outfitted one chief, one officer, and one clerk for $275,000. So that's really sounded, that's pretty cheap. So we took it. Now it's up to, I don't know what it is now, it's up to $1 million someplace. But which is saying we need the police department. You guys want to be independent as a village. Why would you want to go and run with ambulances someplace else? Bring everything in-house. You want to be independent, be independent. If I had an ambulance call out by Sickles out there, in that area out there, and then it come all the way from Rochhouse, I'd be a little worried that they're not gonna get there in time. I don't care if it's 5-10 minute stuff. We had a call, my wife got called in, and I live right down here, Gardner Park, down here. And, it took them, I think the EMTs were there in, I think, seconds, all of them. They had a whole load there, 7 of them. And, the ambulance come within maybe 10, I followed them from Rochhouse. In fact, I was at the bank. And I followed them all the way to my house. And they got there within, Chris, about 10 minutes, 15 minutes probably, for they got my wife there in time to save their life. I gotta say that our EMTs actually saved her life. She was dead and they brought her back. So anyhow, I think you wanna be a village, we were a town back when I was here. The town, and I would just like to stay there, or split it up and have partially town and partially village. But they all voted to go all village. Well, now you're a village, why don't you stay as a village and you have all your equities. Why do you want to bring them all from out of a different area? If you're gonna have a police force, there's nothing wrong with having an ambulance service too. That's my opinion out of it. I've been around a long time, and that's my opinion. Thank you.
Anybody else? Last call. All right, we're gonna move on to number 3, old business discussion and action, the Village of Corona ambulance service. So Alex, you had passed out some calculations. Do you want to go through any of that?
Yeah, we can do that. I don't know if there's a way to get it on the screen, but so other people know what I'm looking at. Yeah, I realized I'd left out the grant revenue and 2% fire dues to this. So it's updated now, but there's a few scenarios I went through, including a base case and then some other, I'll call them sensitivities, like, consider we have some unknowns here, right? Our employee costs, our Riverside or I will call it the RFP contract rate, because, unless Riverside and Safer merged, you'd probably go to RFP between those if you decided to continue. Us charging at the rate that Riverside bills our constituents at, and then I did I called it a break the model scenario, where we have a lot of bad things happen. I guess you'd say for the ambulance service, including having to take on additional debt than we assumed, and requiring 2 full-time EMTs and full benefits, working the maximum hours allowed. So all the healthcare costs, the pension, their additional wages that they would pay, and assuming we'd have to pay $20 an hour for them. Which I know people, what they have in front of them are only 4 of the scenarios, but I have a 5th one that I've shared too. But to break it down, what I did is I broke it down to project the revenue. I assumed 400 calls, which is pretty much in line, actually below what our last 2 years have been, and below where we're trending for us. I took down the Medicare and Medicaid billing rates after Wisconsin Act 228 was passed. Medicaid now has to pay the same rate that Medicare pays. Looking at our historical data from Riverside on the percentage of calls that are broken down for Medicare and Medicaid, private insurance, and self-pay. So private insurance and self-pay get billed out at the rate that either Riverside charges or what Teresa would charge. Currently, Riverside bills $1,500 for an ALS transport. Teresa's proposal would be $1,100. So those bills would go to the self-pay and private insurance. I also included numbers for bad debt. Self-pay people, aka the uninsured, are very likely to default on their bills. So I looked at Riverside's historical bad debt levels and used a calculation based on the number of calls in Kronenwetter, because it's not broken out by municipality. So I took their 28% of calls of all of Riverside and allocated that to their bad debt for the last 2 years and took the average. I included these revenues. I used the assumed capital cost, the cost to service that capital, $710,100 of debt. It's about $90,384 of debt service that would need to be added to the levy. And I looked at our expenses using Teresa's assumptions here for our wages and all the other types of expenses in her proposal. We can go into that some more. So yeah, I used the calculated revenue minus the projected bad debt. So the calculated revenue is what we'd collect from our calls, from what we billed out, plus the 2% fire dues, plus the grants revenue, subtracting out debt we could not collect on. So you're adding debt, and then you are having expenses, but you're getting revenue into the general fund. So there's a couple funds getting played with here, so I looked at that as well. Effectively, there's this next line item that says the net taxpayer expense. That is the net cost when you add debt and all of our expenses minus the revenue. So even, I don't think anyone has been claiming the point of the ambulance service is to be a quote-unquote money maker, but rather to be less of a net cost than just a pure cost of going to Riverside, which Teresa in her proposal assumed $139,150. I took a look at some numbers provided me by Riverside themselves from, I don't know if he's former chief yet, but the time chief, Rob Bowen. We don't need to go into that, what happened there. But, so yeah, I looked at the fund impacts. When you add that debt service to the levy, there was a projected property tax hike of 2.7% on the village mill rate, or about $17.94 on a house assessed at $200,000. The next line item there is the impact to the general fund. Our general fund for the last couple years has faced a very large deficit. I believe in our last budget, we had to go about $500,000 into the red that we had to take from our undesignated reserve funds to cover. This is a serious issue we need to address in the next 4 years before we run out of money in our surplus funds. You know, so some tough decisions will need to be made there, but this is another thing to look at too. That going to this ambulance service, you're going away from a pure general fund expense to adding some debt, potentially getting some revenue, and making potentially a significant impact to our general fund deficit. Unless you go into some of the other scenarios, it depends. And then that last line item is the net savings when you look at all the total costs of the proposal under this quote-unquote base case, $72,129 annually in year 2026. An ambulance service versus what is projected for Riverside. Again, these are just projections at Riverside, assuming nothing else goes up except wages go up 3%. Scenario 2 is the scenario of what happens if we were to bill at the rate Riverside bills our patients. You know, again, the village board could, you know, set that rate, but that kind of shows that there is some ways that we can, I guess you'd say, build additional margin into this, not cost our residents any more money, and potentially handle some pitfalls that could come up. So, I mean, you can go on to the next scenario. But that made an impact of around $50,000 annually to bill at Riverside's rates rather than Teresa's proposed billing rate. So 121,000 of net savings versus 72,000. The next one is assuming we have to pay more in wages. It's just a flat 10% higher with that. I've got another scenario later that looks at that even more in depth. The next one is just what if Riverside charges more than what's assumed in there? So I just assumed the contract rate would be 10% higher. And then the final one is the scenario where we have problems getting EMTs and need to pull on full-time EMTs. And the amount of debt we need to take on is $100,000 more to buy those ambulances. In that scenario, that one did show a net expense versus continuing with Riverside. So going full-time EMT, the rules with the Wisconsin retirement system says if you go over 1,200 hours of work, you have to be considered full-time, so you're entitled to benefits and pension. So the assumption here is that we would require 2 considered full-time EMTs working the maximum hours under that, which is without needing to get overtime, which is 212 hours per 28 days. And then, I guess, yeah, including the health and pension benefits, assuming we need both of them, under that scenario, there is a net cost using the rates that were proposed by Chief. But if you increase those rates the other way around, we about break even with Riverside and Safer if we charge the same as what Riverside charges us right now. So all of the scenarios show a positive, or I mean a net reduction to the general fund deficit.
So Alex, to explain that in layman's terms, the village would actually be making money, reducing what has to come out of general fund. Please help explain that. So, when we're looking at the expenses and we're looking at what comes out of the village funds, with it making a little bit more money, we would have, let's say, $10,000 more to spend on the parks and the roads, or apply somewhere else in the budget. Because of the money that's coming. What Alex has shown in this base case, it would be $162,000, is that?
In net deficit reduction to the general fund. So there's 2 funds that impact your property taxes generally. It's your general levy and then the debt levy. So with this, we're adding debt, right, to purchase the capital equipment associated with it. So that necessarily increases the mill rate that you will pay. The general fund, the general levy cannot be increased because of state laws with levy limits by any more than your net new growth as a village. So, you know, it's a whole different topic there about what growth does for what we can invest in the community. That's why I'm pro-growth in this community. But assuming there isn't any growth, you can't increase your general fund levy at all, not even a penny. What we've been having to do, we had years where we had a surplus in the general fund. So it built up this large reserve of undesignated funds. As growth has slowed down and we've experienced high inflation, we've gone into deficit in the general fund this past year in about the $500,000 range before any budget amendments. You know, that's likely to go higher. So our reserves are dwindling rapidly in the general fund. If we continue at this pace, we'll be out of money in probably the next 3 to 4 years. So we do need to make some painful decisions regarding the general fund. You know, we'll also have some other benefits, AKA we'll have some more shared revenue from the state. We also have the power plant revenue that will be coming in next year. That will help with that. But another side benefit of this ambulance proposal is this also provides a potential large benefit to the general fund. You can effectively use the general fund on anything. I mean, I won't say anything, you know, I mean, hopefully not graft, but, you know, I mean, but for the most part, yeah. Parks, roads, salaries, services, police department, fire department, equipment, capital projects, you name it.
So Alex, I'm not sure I understand what you're talking about. You're talking about less of a deficit. So in other words, you're trading our cash for debt, which will then raise taxes, so our deficit doesn't increase, right?
It would, well, that's where I'm going on, right? We'd be adding debt to finance the capital costs. By moving to this ambulance service, we won't also have an expense, a pure expense going to Riverside anymore. We will just have expenses for operating this ambulance service. Off of that, we would get revenue based on what we bill people, off grants, off 2% fire dues, things like that. So those combined lead to a reduction in the general fund deficit.
Okay, but part of it is, are you talking about the $710,000 debt or
Yes.
additional debt besides that?
This proposal right here is $710,100.
Okay, and according to Lisa and Teresa, is similar. According to Teresa's plan, if everything's accurate, we would save about 9,000. Lisa says about 10,000 a year.
I'm not sure where the 9 and 10.
But your numbers show something different.
Yes,
but
because the revenues in those proposals, I think, are far too low. Because of the call volume and the percentage of how those are billed out based on her assumptions in that.
So when Teresa put that together, we had talked about her taking her revenues and doing it as a minimum revenue and taking the expenditures and doing it a little higher, because when you're putting proposals together, we don't wanna assume that we're gonna get a lot of revenue in with very little expenses. You wanna kind of put your budget together where you're taking the minimal revenue in and making it an assumption that your expenses are really high. So Teresa and I have lower numbers than probably what Alex has, just based on that scenario.
To me, I mean, I think it's best, I'm looking at, it's good to look at reasonable revenues. I mean, Riverside's revenues were much higher than this. I mean, basically this assumption, yeah, when you look at it, you take the Medicare rate times 400 and calls, you get Teresa's number, but, but not everybody has Medicare and Medicaid.
There will also be the addition of the GEMT, which is, if you make up the difference in Medicaid costs and what they currently give to what we currently bill. The work in progress in the state was passed for the last couple of years, but it was signed after 28, was signed in 2022, so that is coming forward, which will raise the amount of revenue we get from those Medicaid calls. Mind you, that is a small percentage of the call, but it is additional revenue.
Anybody else have any question or comment?
Yeah, let me see here. My comments on the presentation is that a lot of the benefits displayed are somewhat subjective. And grants, talking about grants, that's also uncertain. I definitely would want to go with the most conservative estimates, like Lisa's talking about. But even there, you've got risks involved, you know, that additional costs that are unforeseen, and it just doesn't seem at this point worth the risk and trouble of the debt and all the organization to save that amount of money. And if there's 7% of the calls that need a paramedic, I wouldn't want to be one of those calls that didn't have one when I needed it. Now, I noticed on the presentation that when it came to needing a paramedic, what was presented was if the person calling in for the ambulance knew they needed a paramedic, well, yeah, of course, then you can have one come and there's no difference. But if the person calling doesn't know it and they don't know they need a paramedic until, you know, the ambulance gets there, or, you know, minutes later, to me, that seems like that would cause you know, could be an important delay. You know, it doesn't mean everybody that doesn't get a paramedic right away is gonna die or anything, but, I mean, if one person dies, say, in the coming year or 2 years, because we made this decision to go this other route rather than what we have now, I myself, I wouldn't want to be that person, and I wouldn't want to be the person who voted for that and responsible for that. I guess my opinion, if there is substantial growth, now we're talking about calls per year, they did shoot up, but it seems like they've leveled off in the last couple of years to just over 400. And that leveling off is significant because for some reason, I don't know if it's COVID or what, but those calls did jump up from 200 and some, you know, to over 400. But now that they've leveled off, I guess I wouldn't necessarily assume that we're gonna be up to, you know, 500, 600 in a couple of years or whatever. And to me, it's, Teresa's talking about these different steps that come to the board, that we're gonna make the decisions on that. The way I see it, once we're committed to this, if we vote yes on this, we, we really won't be making the decisions. We'll have to approve it, because once we're into this, I don't see us backing out. If some surprise costs come up, or maintenance on some of this equipment, or certification, or something that wasn't considered, and we get these nasty surprises, we're stuck. As far as I can see, we're stuck with the program, and we have to see it through. Whereas if, let's just say we vote no tonight, and the calls do go up, it seems to me to be easier at that point to say yes after we've said no than it will be for us to say no later after we've said yes tonight. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, I will address the 7%. The 7% is for an AL, at least for an ALS service. So the AEMT service, we are already an ALS service. That 7% goes down even farther. Because we can already offer that. My recommendation, recommended action is to, go to AEMT flex to paramedic, which means we could potentially already have a paramedic and not need that ALS intercept. We could push to get people to that level, and I know we currently have 2 nurses on staff. Another firefighter, his wife is also a nurse, and she has shown interest in joining the department. That would already put us at 5 paramedics or nurses on our staff already today. So we would already have a jump start on being able to offer that flex to paramedic. In addition, as Alex has mentioned, we don't know what the future looks like for our current contracted provider. There has been a lot of speculation out there as to what is going to happen. But I can almost guarantee you that our current contracted rates will not stay where they are at in 2026. They have shown numbers numerous times that they are not making money on us. They cannot continue to do that. Those contracted rates will go up. I can't judge or estimate what that will be, but I can tell you that it will not stay where it's at today.
Well, but similarly, these numbers that we're projecting, they're gonna go up too, just because everything's going up. So that's,
I guess, I'm sorry, because that statement confused me. I'm sorry, because you said if they're not making money on us at that level, how can we survive and make money? That's what that kind of threw me for a loop.
Keep in mind, they are in business to do a business.
Right.
Right?
Mhm.
We would not be looking to make money. We want to make enough to cover the cost of the service and not to have to pass that on to our taxpayers. By them, that statement of them not making money, they're going to have to raise our costs to continue to cover their costs and their research. That makes sense? They're not going to continue to keep saying increase. Some of it is Riverside has to depreciate their
Right.
assets. The municipality does not.
Okay. So the other question, if I want to understand this right, it seems like we're shifting this basically from our general fund to the levy, where everybody in the whole village is going to pay for everybody's call now. Kinda, because right now, with Riverside, there's a flat rate, the general fund just pays it. So if I need an ambulance, I pay the 1,500 out of my pocket, you pay the 1,500, whatever amount that is. But with this, essentially, we're borrowing this money, our taxes are gonna go up. So everybody's literally paying for this, for everybody's call. Am I understanding that correctly?
Per Alex's configuration, it would be $18 per $200
Yeah, I can,
But then that money, Chris, goes back into the general fund, right?
let me,
It can be used to help pay for the roads, which then doesn't come out of your pocket in another way.
no, yeah, so it's complicated, right? So, to explain, yes, anytime you add debt, you add to the levy, because you go to the debt levy. right? It's like a separate fund. It would be going up $90,000 a year, right? That's the 2.7%. The mill rate, we did cut taxes 4% for this year from 2023. But, that's, not related to this piece. When you look at the net savings, right, that last piece, it's not just shifting the cost to the debt levy, to clarify. It's because like all the revenues from it would still be coming back. I think that's the point to get across. No matter what we do here, the taxpayers of Kronenwetter are not making money on the ambulance service, whether it's at Riverside or here. It's, how much are we spending? It's a service offered by the village. There is a net cost, no matter what we do. If we contract it out, contract provider, because we're not a member of Riverside, we don't have any voting rights, they can't lose money in providing the contract to us. So they're either gonna have us have to pay part of their equipment and everything else with that fully, right? They're not gonna subsidize us at all, right? Us, I would argue actually with this, the taxpayers are subsidizing less. I know it sounds counterintuitive, even though you're raising taxes, but when you have those net savings, that net savings is to the taxpayers, including debt and general fund. It just happens to also require some debt levy, and when you add it all together, yes, it has a even larger net benefit to the general fund on top of it. I mean, you effectively are adding to the general fund the net savings plus the debt levy. So yes, you are shifting some to the debt levy, but you're also saving more than what our just pure expense to Riverside is.
That make any sense?
Well, not really. Because, I mean, I was looking at the other numbers, all of a sudden you got these huge savings, and it's like, from what we would receive before, all of a sudden you got this utopia here. And it doesn't make sense. I wish I would've had this before, because it just.
Well, I looked at it, cause like I said, I think the other assumption was that we're just gonna bill out at Medicare rates for everybody.
I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah. No, I,
Medicare and Medicaid, I should say, the two of them. They are the majority of the calls, right? They're 69% of the calls on average.
well, if,
Every other medical service in town does it. There is no such thing as one rate. You bill what Medicare allows. When it becomes a private citizen, it's a whole different story.
Medicare will only pay a certain amount, Medicaid will only pay a certain amount. But if I call an ambulance, my insurance is going to be a much higher amount.
Yeah.
And that's what I was saying.
Yes, yes. But even so, it's not going to be.
It depends. There's usually, let's see, there's usually customers that don't get out of here.
well, if I had to vote on this tonight, I would say no. And for one reason, I mean, Sean brought it up, we've got a presentation by, the fire department here, and they're optimistic, and they're saying, yeah, we can make this work, and we can do it, we got the spirit here, they can do it. Well, we do need like an impartial third party, whether it's a committee or what. It's like you have a business idea and you say, yeah, we can do it. And you go to a bank and say, we need a loan for this. And you're all excited, and then they look at it impartially. They will, their opinion is more valid. I'm not saying there's, fudge numbers or anything here. I'm just saying it's presented from a viewpoint that is not impartial. And there's other people who have other numbers that, you know, have argued with this. So I would say if anything, I mean, to me, it's safe to vote no if we're uncertain, then, and the second choice would be to form some kind of committee or of some type of really knowledgeable people, not necessarily even from the village. I mean, if you can get people from other municipalities who don't really have a dog in this fight, but know really what these costs are realistically, not that this isn't realistic, but from a different point of view, to really get a well-documented or well-researched, objective prognosis on this, because we gotta look at the risk reward, and to me, the risk to reward does not justify voting yes tonight with what I see.
Aaron, you got it.
Yeah, I got something I'd like to say. First of all, good job, Teresa, good job, Alexa, and good job, Alex. You guys all put in a lot of work. This was a lot of information to review, and it's all important. We need to look at both, especially the financials and the services of the ambulance. If we do get an ambulance, it will add value to our village. I've heard residents tell me that they were excited to know that we might get one. It would make Kronenwetter a more attractive place to live. It is a lot of money, no doubt about it, but we would be getting a lot in return. 2 units, trained staff, and no more contract negotiations with the outside ambulance service. And the bottom line is, we should give Teresa and her team the opportunity to implement this ambulance. They may exceed our expectations. I do agree with Alex that they are on the conservative side. So I'm thankful that you're willing to take this on, because the day might come where we might get rates from an outside party really high, and we don't have someone like Teresa and her team willing to take this on. So, that's it.
Anybody over there have a comment?
I just wanted to add that I don't believe that the calls are going to plateau for very long. 100 years ago, 1 in 20 Americans was of senior citizen age. 50 years ago, that had doubled. In the very near future, 1 in 5 Americans is going to be of senior citizen age. We're only going to see that call rate rise. So whatever plateau we see right now, based on our continued level of growth, I don't think it's going to last very long. So, and I certainly agree. They put a ton of work into this. Alex has certainly opened my eyes to more than what I thought I understood. So, yeah, that's all I wanted to add to that.
Chief, I want to thank you for all the hard work that you put into this, and thank you to your members of your department that go to work every day and help our citizens. I appreciate all the time and effort that you put into this, but I also appreciate the input from the village residents. There is a lot at stake here. I actually do like the idea of an ambulance at some point in the future, but I think the point that was brought up by Sean, that to do due diligence to the village and to the respect of the fire department and a possible future ambulance service, I think a subcommittee, a special subcommittee would be a really good idea. Because now, like Chris had said, the numbers that we were presented with before, and then the work that Alex had put into this presentation too, some of that's just not jiving and making sense to me either. I don't feel comfortable either right now with those numbers. I would be in support of having a special committee established for us to review this further, with input from the village residents and potentially from an outside source, people who don't have, like you said, the skin in the game, that are village residents.
Yeah, like I say, my issue is just really not understanding like Alex's numbers, how your numbers went, and really the whole picture. Because one thing I'm trying to look at is the whole picture for the village. You know, okay, we're gonna borrow a bunch of money. It's gonna increase our taxes. Well, then you look at the rest of our village. Public Works hasn't bought a new truck in ages. I mean, look at how much equipment out there that we'll probably need to upgrade. There's roads gonna be needing upgrading. And guess what? We're gonna have to borrow money for that.
Yeah, but, I mean, you also have to look at the fact that by some of that point in, and it's only $18 per $200,000 home, some of that will go back and be available for those other expenditures.
Because there's a lot of stuff in here, I know, like, we don't have maintenance and ambulance breaks, and it costs,
That was included in the budget, maintenance costs in the budget.
so like,
It's an ongoing
For
expense.
the fire department, the DPW, we include those.
One thing that I didn't see in there that I was kind of thinking about is that, when you buy the equipment, you know, you get a manufacturer's warranty. Do we have anything written in there, I didn't see it, possibly missed it, that for an extended warranty period, or for a service contract, that we get for annual PMs, routine PMs on stuff when it breaks down?
That is included in
Is
the
that-
maintenance cost.
Okay.
Fire department has a separate maintenance budget for fire department, including the safety for the expenses.
Do you have a contract for biomedical equipment with the company?
We do. Company we use just words with another company.
The reason I'm opposed to a special committee is that will delay this probably 6 months minimum. You know, I think we've done a lot of thought on this. At the same time, you know, there needs to be time to implement all this. And along the way, to say there's other stuff up there, right, there's the option of buying a new ambulance or another used ambulance. Well, that could lower that levy by a certain amount, right? If you're assuming the same amount, you know, that levy would go down by a third if you get another used ambulance. But you'd have some more maintenance costs, so it's a trade-off. The same time, with our general fund situation, I know this is kind of counterintuitive, you know, I'm not for cutting service. I think we should move full steam ahead to go to full paramedic as fast as possible with it, if that's possible. I mean, even if we have to start as flex paramedic, encouraging as many paramedic trained people to get in the department, even if it means a bit of an impact to wages. I think there's enough margin on this proposal to pay off. But we also have to make some serious decisions about that will impact our general fund. I mean, this is not become an immediate crisis, but it is something very serious that'll take a while to ease in, and I don't want overnight tax hikes. I mean, right now, we're effectively, when you look at our total levy, you know, not our total expenses for the village, because we're fortunate to get a lot of funding from the power plant as it is now, but when you look at our levy, we're at a 15% deficit right now versus what we're bringing in. You know, and our general levy is in dire shape right now. Even motions, even when you go to that break the model option there, if you wanna pull it up, you know, with that, if we see that our costs are going up, that we need 2 full-time EMTs, we absolutely can increase our rates then at our discretion to match Riverside's current rates that they're charging our residents. We can go from 1,100 to 1,500. When you put in the 1,500, you're basically break even with Riverside right now. That's needing to pay 2 full-time EMTs, needing to take on 100,000 more in debt than we projected to handle unexpected cost increases. And with that, you still have $100,000 in general fund savings. There's a 3% increase to the mill rate. It's not ideal. No one likes higher taxes by any means, but we do need to make some tough decisions for once about our general fund. And I would hope that this board, and I would think the majority of the community wants us to make these tough decisions without making drastic cuts in the services they receive. You know, whether it's cutting the police department or whatever. We need to make some tough decisions, and let's start making some of these decisions, so that if we do have to do some tax hikes, I mean, we have the lowest mill rate of any incorporated municipality in the entire area. We're lower than a lot of the townships when you look at, the whole area. I'm not advocating massive tax increases, you know. Any hike associated with this would be much less than we've already reduced taxes for this year. But in my opinion, we need to make decisions that can make some real general fund deficit reduction for once.
Well, I guess what I'm hearing is a lot of hope coming from people here, because, like I say, if you go to a bank, they come back with hard information on whether or not to loan you the money. We are dealing with a lot of hope, and Alex, you know, you may know a lot about these numbers or whatever, but I personally would not want to make this decision, you know, on your calculations. Not that you don't know what you're doing, but you could be making mistakes, you could be taking numbers that aren't exactly accurate or aren't including certain things. It is a big commitment, and I have no trouble making big commitments like I did. I made the motion for the ladder truck, you know, somebody had to. But there's just too much doubt and questions here to, if it takes us 6 months, then at least we can go into it more confidently. You know, if you guys go ahead with this, I certainly hope I'm wrong, you know, because I don't want to see what I think, you know, could possibly happen. It may work out well. It may not, and be a big problem. But for something that big, I think we should take a little more time and have a third party of some type look at it a little more objectively.
I guess one of the big questions, I was getting hit at work a lot today by just people coming up to me and said, well, if the ambulance is so profitable, why is everybody in the whole nation basically consolidating with other villages, towns, cities? And, I mean, I'm getting hit hard with that question.
And nowhere did we say that the ambulance is going to be profitable. We have proposed and shown that it is paid for itself.
The ongoing costs, I want to clarify on that, it's not profitable, and it's important to understand that.
Financially advantageous.
Yes, it's less of a loser. When you're talking about consolidation and mergers, that's a different discussion than contracting, because the contractor is going to necessarily need to break even contracting from us, right? Why would Rothschild and Schofield sign on to lose money, more money, and have their taxpayers pay more, right? They're not gonna do that. So when you merge, though, when you're both there, you're both basically agreeing that you're both able to lose money. So, you know, as you get bigger like this, I mean, I think that's kind of the important distinction. I don't think anyone, it would be foolish if I was saying this is gonna make the village money. This is gonna lose us less money than having to pay 100% of the actual cost of it from billing and our tax dollars from somebody else.
Well, like I say, you're talking about cost effectiveness.
Mhm.
And if we're talking 9,000 to 10,000 a year, it just, to me, does not justify the risk. And if we're talking, you know, big numbers like you brought up, well, the,
Our budget, the numbers Alex is showing also include the difference in lowering our deficit.
well, lowering the deficit by increasing tax. Like I said before, it's kind of a trade-off, you know, whatever. To me, the only way to lower that deficit is to be more efficient with our spending that's a whole different subject, but.
You got a comment?
Yeah, if y'all don't mind, I appreciate it. By the way, I did get a couple of texts while we were talking. The trustees admire my ability to run from one end of the room and the other, navigating, the feet, the knees, and there's also no sense of humor at this hour, I can see that. A couple of things. I'm coming in on the end of the fourth quarter, almost the end of the game here, I'm coming in at the end. And so I'm still learning quite a bit, and I'm glad in a lot of ways just to listen. And from where I sat, it sounds like we've kind of come to an end. But one thing that's critical is negotiating a future contract if that were to happen, if we needed to do it. So the fact that you're having this conversation and you're trying to advance such a cause puts you in a real good position to negotiate if that were to be something that we talk about, which has led me to the next suggestion. And this is all over the country. We're all having to, so this would be to your point, Ken, would be, you have to look at now these days of phasing things in. You can't gobble it up in such a way and then open it up in a discussion and then having it an aspect of this is the only way that it can happen. You have to look at now financially, how do we engage some of these things? Because I already heard, I think we all value it. We all value the fire department. We all value the response and the quality. But, to arrive at a spot, with the cost, you can't count on grants. I haven't been able to count on a grant in 5 years. And I was good at it, but you can't count on them. And then probably the other aspect of it is in phasing, you could actually roll some of this out in such a manner that it makes sense to the community, but you could also have a contract with, the current, sponsor. It doesn't mean you gotta quit it and everybody's gonna have a breakup party. There are ways to do this stuff that make sense to all at hand and enhance the community and the value that we go by. So we hadn't heard of anybody talk about phasing at all, but that's the way it is. And so, if you step out of the fine state of Wisconsin, I'm used to it. I phase it. So I'll tell you personally, I bought a house here in town, and I love the house, but it needed a lot of remodeling. So I had to phase in the flooring first, the painting, and then the exterior. Now it's painting season right outside, and you have to phase it in depending upon a lot of variables. But to try to gobble up one thing like this for a village this size, you are taking a risk without considering some of that effort. Now, do I know all the facts related to the financials? I hear the same things, why is it all consolidating and, it's going away from hospitals and county and it's migrating in different directions? That's a concern. We're going to talk about it. And it's not to say somebody didn't do a good job, and it doesn't mean that Texans are smarter than people in Wisconsin. I guarantee that's not true. But it's also to say that, to kind of look at it from a little different angle of how to, finance as you go and how you pay it and not, put it on the burden. I will tell you, just sitting here, in the last town I was in, we put $5 on every water bill. That was ambulance service, monthly. So 5 times 12, and everybody did that. And then we didn't raise taxes, and that paid for new things as we went along. There's all kinds of options in other states. Now, can we do that here? I don't know. You might have to require some other basis of approval by the ratepayers and also, I don't know how far to get into all that, but by the taxpayers as well as the ratepayers. So having said that, there are other ways to anticipate where you arrive, but it always helps when you hear key words being vocalized here, and I appreciate that. And that's all that I had. And I don't know enough to really banter around and discuss it, but I'm doing the best I can. Give me another week. So.
I will mention, there are 3 services that have started in the last year or will be starting upcoming. Grand Chute is one of my realized somebody's taking a larger, but they have moved away from having their own. They're now going back to having their own because of the cost and the increases in their contracted fees. Portage is a huge one, not Portage County, Portage, Wisconsin. They contracted with Aspirus for their ambulance services, and their contracted fees started going astronomically high. And at that point, what choice do you have? You have to pay it. You don't have a choice to negotiate your contract fees if you're not in a position to tomorrow start your own ambulance service. As I said earlier, we need the time that this year and a half would give us to be ready to start running January 1st of 2026. Our contract ends January or December 31st of 2025. Unless we are willing to see what those contracted fees look like in 2026, we need to start on this now.
Okay. Well, we could sit here and talk around it all night, or we could see where everybody stands on it. So I make a motion to approve the ambulance proposal.
Direct to start,
Pardon me?
to direct to start it, or is that?
To direct, I make a motion to approve it and direct the fire department to begin the process of starting an ambulance service and doing all the necessary things to get that going for January 1, 2026.
I'll second that.
All right, I got a motion by Kelly and a second by Aaron to approve the fire department's plan to move forward with a ambulance service and to begin design and implementation to hit the ground running on January 1st,
2026.
Is there any other discussion?
You, second.
What's that?
Were you asking for a second?
No, I said, is there any other discussion?
Oh, no.
I do want to point one thing out, that Riverside did go to paramedic level in June of '23. And if you don't think they're going to be passing those costs on to us next contract, they probably will. And we should take pride in ourselves and Kronenwetter should try to implement their own ambulance service.
Well, I guess we're lucky because we have two competitors too. Some of these other places where they jacked up the rates, we don't know their situation, but we've got, Safer and Riverside. So I don't think anybody's gonna get too far out of control on that. And like I said, if we vote no on this and somebody, wants to then make a motion, to still research it through another committee, that might be the better way to go.
Yeah, that's actually where I was going. If this fails, then we go to the next step, which would be taking it a step further. But I figure let's figure out where we're at right now.
I still think going to send it to committee to delay it just hurts the odds of this being a success. I mean,
Well, I
think
don't know
there's
that it would take 6 months either, though. I think a lot of the heavy lifting's already been done. There's a lot of issues still to have some questions to be answered in some cases. So I don't agree that it's gonna take 6 months.
I've never seen a special committee take less than that.
Heck, we did the committee on committees and it took 8.
By doing this now, this does give Teresa to get more time to get her team together.
Right, and if they come to a point, I guess that's the big thing for me, is even if they get to a point where no dollars have been spent, no contracts been signed, and we realize, you know what, we can't be ready for 26. It's gonna have to be 27, guess what? We can still sign a 1-year contract, so this gets the ball rolling. There's still gonna be starts and stops along the way, or I guess a better term is checkpoints, where it's gonna be go or no go, And so we're just getting the ball rolling.
Well, maybe we create that subcommittee as well as, so that there is that group that is looking into
Monitoring
those
the
questions,
progress?
comments.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
That's probably even better proposal, right? A committee to monitor the progress of
Yeah.
and help the department
We
along.
could tackle these tough questions right out of the gate,
right.
and then that maybe would not delay like you had suggested with the 6 months.
You know, respectfully though, we are failing to take into consideration what we've heard from the village residents today. I think an ambulance is a fantastic idea in the future. I don't think we've laid out all the information to the village residents. I think us as a board, we've been inundated with information, but unfortunately, the residents are the ones that haven't gotten all that information. Having one small public forum like this with a small handful of a cross-section of the village does not fully represent everybody's opinion in the village. And are you gonna have everybody come to consensus all the time? No, of course not. But I think to do our due diligence and be respectful of village residents, I think we need to have a subcommittee. No, maybe it takes 6 months, maybe it doesn't, but at least we're getting the input from the village residents so they will see the full impact of a decision that we would make right now.
Well, do you wanna modify the motion to have a committee?
I would move to amend, trustee Coyle's motion to include creating a special committee, made up of board members and citizens to monitor and, advise the Kronenwetter Fire Department in implementing an ambulance service.
I'll second that.
Can I amend that?
Amend the amendment?
Yeah. Just change a few words. You said citizens and who?
Board members and citizens.
Oh, okay. I would not mind having anybody knowledgeable from surrounding communities too, if they're knowledgeable
Can we
in
put,
in
I
this
don't think we
area.
can put,
Well, we've done,
we can put,
for the ad hoc, for the overpass committee, we had non-residents on that committee. We had representative from Moseley, we had a representative from Rothschild, I think we had a representative from Weston.
I mean, I don't just want, I don't want to be on there because I don't know enough about it. I want people who have worked in that area and know the ins and outs of it.
So I just want some clarity. Are you saying that you would vote to approve the ambulance service and create a
An
subcommittee?
oversight committee.
yes.
I'm sorry, I'd have to vote no on that then.
Well, we're
I
gonna
would
get to
vote, I
voting here
would
in a
vote
minute.
for the committee, subcommittee, but not to approve the ambulance service.
So Alex, was your subcommittee just subcommittee, or did you want the specifics of who's on the committee?
Just a subcommittee for now.
A number, 7 people?
Sure.
Okay. Because then right after, if this passes, then we'll have to start working on a committee.
Yep.
list, right?
Yep.
Okay.
So if you're approving this, and you get this committee, and they order the ambulances, and the committee says, hey, this isn't gonna work out, then what happens?
That's what I was saying, is that the oversight committee is going to be the checks and balances, because there's gonna be checkpoints along the way that say, hey, we're gonna have to stop, or or we can continue forward. This isn't, we're not handing over a bundle of cash and say, go ahead, sign contracts for new ambulances.
Yeah, they're gonna buy
That's what, they're gonna be the oversight for
approval from
this, and say, hey, we're gonna have to pull you back, because this ain't gonna be ready for 26, maybe 27, but this allows them to get the ball rolling further. But, so, I guess we need to take a vote and see where everybody stands, so.
Any other discussion?
Can you repeat the motion?
Move to amend to create a subcommittee of 7 people and to include residents from other communities.
So we're
That was the amendment.
voting on the amendment.
Right. So
Yeah,
first
you
we're
have
gonna
to
vote on the amendment,
Yep,
to create the subcommittee.
yep,
All right, call the roll, please.
Alex Vedvik,
yes.
Kelly Coyle,
Yes.
Aaron Mishka,
Yes.
Chris Voll,
Yes.
Chris Iden,
Yes.
Cindy Lee Buchowski Huffman,
Yes.
Ken Charneski.
Yes.
All right, the amendment passes. Okay, now back to the original motion, which was to allow the fire department to begin the process to create a ambulance service.
Alex Vedvik,
Roll call, sorry.
Yeah.
Yes.
Kelly Coyle,
Yes.
Aaron Mishka,
Yes.
Chris Voll,
Yes.
Chris Iden,
No.
Cindy Lee Buchowski Huffman,
No.
Ken Charneski.
No.
Motion carried 4-3.
So now what did you vote on? You're gonna have an ambulance service?
We're gonna start the process, Jerry. we're gonna create a subcommittee that's gonna monitor the process, and if at any point in time, something doesn't jive out, there will be an option to cancel the whole thing.
The subcommittee will help us with checks and balances, help us
Right.
have our no vote at certain.
Yep.
Yep.
I guess one thing I just want to comment, I wish in the next future meeting, stuff like this, we all can get ahead of time, so I can study it and find out what the numbers are, because I don't know. That's why I voted no, because it didn't make sense to me, so.
Yep.
I'll share you the
I was gonna
spreadsheet.
vote no until we added the subcommittee piece, but. Anyway, so item number 4.
No, we haven't adjourned yet.
No, we haven't.
4, motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Who was
All right,
that?
Ken made a motion, and Alex made a second to adjourn. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. No,
Yes, then.